They snickered when I signed the admission forms, like I'd signed away my mind, but I was signing time, and time has always been on my side. They thought it was done, like it was the end. My son, my daughter-in-law, they laughed like it was a joke, thinking I couldn't hear them. She'll be out of our hair now, they said, the nurse nodding like she was in on it too. They thought they were doing me a favor, as if putting me in that sterile room would make everything better, as if I was some burden they could drop off and forget. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just signed papers that they thought meant I was gone. But I wasn't gone. I stayed silent, not because I didn't feel it, but because I was watching. I noticed the way they handled the forms like they were sweeping away a mess. I noticed the way they avoided my eyes, like they were relieved to be rid of me. But they didn't know. They didn't know I was still here, watching, waiting. Time was mine now, not theirs. And when they thought they won, they hadn't even begun to lose. I worked. I saved. I served them joy on chipped plates. And now they won't even answer my calls. It wasn't always like this. I remember when they were small, when their little hands would tug at my skirt and their voices would fill the air with laughter. They were the light of my life, and I gave everything I had for them. I didn't have much, but I had enough for them. Enough to make sure they never went without. I raised them on worn-out shoes and boiled rice. I made sure they never felt the weight of what I lacked. Every day, I'd get up before the sun and start the fire. I'd cook what little we had and set the table, always with a smile, so they'd never know the strain I carried. I told them it was for their futures, for their dreams, but what I really wanted was for them to have a better life than the one I was living. Their shoes were old, but I made sure they were always polished, always looking presentable for school. I made do with what I had. The rice was simple, but it filled their bellies. It wasn't gourmet, but they never complained. They didn't know how often I went without, how I stretched every dollar until it snapped just to get them what they needed. They didn't need to know. All they needed to know was that I loved them, that I'd give them everything. They were my world, my reason to keep going. When they asked for new shoes, I found a way. When they needed books for school, I scraped together whatever I could. My own needs didn't matter. As long as they were happy, as long as they had what they needed, that was all that mattered to me. I worked long hours, cleaning homes that weren't mine, scrubbing floors and dusting shelves while their laughter echoed in my mind. I worked for women who never once asked how I was, who never once showed a moment of kindness. But I didn't mind. I didn't care. All I cared about was the extra money to put in their college fund. I would come home exhausted, but I would still find the energy to cook, to clean, to make their world shine. They never knew how hard I worked. They never knew how much of myself I gave away just to make sure they had what they wanted. When it was time for college, I sold my wedding bangles. They didn't know. They never asked. I sold them to pay for their books, their tuition, their dreams. It wasn't a hard decision. I didn't care about the bangles. I didn't care about the memories that were tied to them. What I cared about was their future, and I would sacrifice anything to make sure they had a chance at a better life. The house wasn't much, but I made it home. And I made sure they always had a place to come back to, a place that was warm and welcoming, even when I was cold and weary. I skipped doctor appointments to pay for their school fees. When I felt the tightness in my chest, I didn't go to the doctor. Their books were more important. Their school supplies were more important. Their future was more important. So I ignored the pain, the exhaustion, and pushed through. Because that's what mothers do. We give, we sacrifice, and we love without ever asking for anything in return. I never asked for riches. I never wanted a big house or a fancy car. I just wanted their respect, their love, and for them to see me, to appreciate what I'd done for them. But that was never enough. It was never enough to make them realize how much I had given. When they left for college, I didn't cry. I told myself it was for the best. They were going to have everything I didn't. They were going to build a life that was beyond my wildest dreams. And I was happy for them, happy that they could escape the life I had built for them. But as the years passed, the phone calls stopped coming. The visits became fewer and fewer. The holidays came and went, and they didn't come home. They didn't even send cards. I waited. I waited for the phone to ring, for a visit, for something that would remind me that they hadn't forgotten. But it never came. And when they did finally call, it wasn't to ask how I was doing. It wasn't to see if I was well. It was about money. They needed something, some form, some signature. They needed things taken care of. I was no longer a mother to them. I was a resource. I worked. I saved. I gave everything I had. But they didn't see it. They didn't see me. Now, when I pick up the phone, the calls are silent. They don't return my messages. I ask if they're coming by, and they say they're too busy. The excuses pile up, and I wonder if they even remember who I am. I look at their faces in photos, and I wonder if they see the woman who gave everything to make sure they had what they needed. But they don't. They never have. And now, when I try to reach out, they turn away. They don't visit. They don't care. I didn't want to believe it. At first, I thought it was just a phase. The world was busy, after all, and they had their own lives to live. But I couldn't ignore the changes, not forever. Visits became fewer. The long hours I used to wait for the doorbell to ring seemed to stretch into days, then weeks. At first, it was just a missed weekend, then another. Finally, months would go by before I heard from either of them. I'd leave messages, short ones, just asking how they were, if they were still planning to come by. I'd tell myself that they were just busy with their work, their friends, their families. I never pushed them. I never complained. But still I waited. And then there were the smiles. Hollow smiles. The kind that don't quite meet the eyes. They'd smile when they came, but it was different now. It wasn't the smile of a daughter who hadn't seen her mother in a while. It was the smile of someone trying to pretend everything was fine, trying to make everything seem normal when it clearly wasn't. They would sit beside me, their voices polite, their laughs strained. "How are you feeling, Mom?" they'd ask, but it wasn't about how I was doing. It was about something else, something they weren't saying, something they didn't need to say. It was the little comments that started to slip in, as if they thought I wouldn't notice. "What if you couldn't remember things, Mom? What if your memory starts to fade?" The first time they said it, I laughed it off. "Oh, I'll be just fine," I said. But the doubt crept in, like a shadow I couldn't shake. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to see what they were seeing. But it was there, in the way they asked, in the way they watched me like I was fragile, like I was slipping. It was there, in the way they said, "You should rest, Mom. You can't keep up like you used to." They were right, of course. I was slowing down. I wasn't as spry as I used to be. But that wasn't the point. The point was that I didn't need their pity. I didn't need them to see me as someone who couldn't handle my own life. I'd handled everything for years. I had raised them, worked 2 jobs to put food on the table, given everything I had. And now they were treating me like I wasn't capable of taking care of myself. But still, I told myself that it was love, that they were worried. I told myself they just wanted what was best for me, even if they didn't know how to show it. I wanted to believe it. I needed to believe it. One day, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. They thought I was asleep, but I wasn't. I was lying in the other room, listening, pretending I couldn't hear them as they talked in hushed tones. I heard my son's voice, low and careful. "Maybe it's time we make it official, you know? Get her in a place where someone can take care of her full time." And then my daughter-in-law's voice, quiet but firm, like she'd already made up her mind. "Yeah, it's probably best. She's slowing down, John. We can't keep up with her forever." They were talking about me, but they didn't know I was listening. I stayed still, holding my breath. I didn't want them to know I had heard. I didn't want them to see me as someone who was falling apart. But the truth was there in their words, in their tone. I wasn't just slowing down. I was becoming a problem to them, a burden. They were already planning for the day when they wouldn't have to deal with me anymore. And I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think they could treat me this way. But it was there, in the back of my mind, growing like a weed that I couldn't pull out. It was there every time they came to visit, every time they smiled that empty smile, every time they said, "Maybe it's time to slow down, Mom." They thought I didn't hear them, but I did. And still I tried to believe. I tried to believe that it was love, that they were just worried about me. I tried to believe that they cared, even if they didn't know how to show it. I wanted to believe that the woman who had given so much of herself, who had loved them with every ounce of her being, wasn't being erased. I kept telling myself that it was love, even though everything inside me was telling me otherwise. But sometimes, when the house was quiet, I'd find myself looking at their old notes, the ones they wrote me when they were children. I'd pull them out of the box and read them, over and over. I love you, Mommy. You're the best, Mom. I hope you never get sick. I would hold those notes close, reading the words they once wrote, trying to remind myself that they once cared. I'd close my eyes and remember the days when they would run to me with scraped knees, when they'd climb into my lap and tell me their secrets. And for a moment, I believed again. I believed in the love they once showed me. But that belief was fading, slowly, like a photograph left in the sun too long. They brought me out for lunch. My son helped me into the car like he used to when I was younger, holding my coat, asking how I was doing. My daughter-in-law sat next to me, her smile tight, her eyes darting between the road and me. Just a quick lunch, Ma, she said, like it was no big deal. We're just going to grab a bite. I smiled. I didn't question it. I trusted them. After all, they were my children. What could be wrong with a simple lunch? But when we pulled up to the building, I knew something wasn't right. The sign out front didn't say restaurant. It said care facility. My heart dropped into my stomach. Where are we? I asked, my voice shaking slightly. My son turned to me, his expression unreadable. It's just a quick stop, Mom, he said. We need to take care of something for you. It's going to help. I didn't say anything. I just followed them inside, the quiet halls stretching out like a maze, unfamiliar and sterile. The nurses greeted us with false smiles, taking my coat and leading me to a small room. I sat in the chair, my hands folded neatly in my lap. The room smelled of bleach and something sharp. Not like a home, not like the smell of the kitchen I used to cook in or the fresh air from the backyard. This room smelled like something lost, something left behind. One of the nurses gave me a clipboard. I looked at the papers, but the words blurred in my vision. She told me to sign. It's just routine, she said, her voice too smooth, too practiced. But when my son and daughter-in-law stepped back, I knew. I knew then what was happening. I didn't sign my name. I didn't give them anything. They handed me the pen, and I took it in my trembling fingers. I signed. I signed my life away with a shaky hand, knowing it was too late to stop them. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask questions. I just signed. When I handed back the papers, they smiled. They both smiled like they had done something good for me. It's all taken care of, my daughter-in-law said, patting me on the shoulder. You're going to be fine here, Ma. They left without another word, leaving me alone with the nurse who was already leading me down a cold, bright hall. The door to my room clicked shut behind me. I stood there, trying to take in what had just happened. They had signed me away. My house, my accounts, my voice, everything I had worked for, everything I had built was gone. They took it all. And now I was here in this sterile place as if it had always been my fate. They didn't even look back. They didn't care. You'll be fine here, Mrs. Patel, the nurse said, her voice too loud, too cheerful. She guided me to a bed in a room with nothing but a thin blanket and an uncomfortable chair. No photos, no books, no calendar. Not even the bed was mine. The curtains didn't move. The food had no salt. Even the birds outside flew past the window like they didn't see me. I tried to speak, tried to ask for something, anything, but when I opened my mouth, all that came out was a dry cough. It's just temporary, the nurse said, her words dull and impersonal. We just need to monitor you. Monitor me? Monitor me for what? I wasn't sick. I wasn't a child. But they treated me like I was fading away already, like I was already gone. They didn't see me, not as the woman who had raised them, who had worked and sacrificed everything for them. They saw me as a problem, an inconvenience, someone to be managed. The days passed in a blur. I didn't speak much. I didn't need to. They all knew I wouldn't resist. They thought I was done, but I wasn't. They thought that signing those papers meant I was finished. But it wasn't over. Not yet. They thought I was settling in. I was setting up. They thought my silence meant surrender. But silence can mean many things. For me, it meant calculation. Every word they spoke, every paper they filed, Every nurse who treated me like a fading photograph, I recorded it all. But I didn't scream. I wasn't screaming. I was writing. It started with a small pencil, left behind in the corner of the common room. Someone had been filling out a crossword puzzle and walked away. The staff didn't notice when I slipped it into my pocket. I asked for a notebook for therapy, I told them, and they happily handed me one, thinking I'd scribble childish memories or draw flowers like the others. But I wasn't doodling. That little notebook became my vault, my weapon. Each night, after they wheeled me back to my room and shut the door, I wrote names, dates, numbers, every strange conversation, every form I was forced to sign, every whisper I overheard behind half-closed doors. My hand was slow at first, but steady. The act of writing steadied my mind, sharpened my focus. They thought I was adjusting to my new home. I was documenting my captivity. One afternoon, as I sat by the small window watching the leaves move gently in the wind, a memory surfaced, clear and sharp like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. Gloria, Miss Gloria Bennett, my neighbor from years ago, my friend, a lawyer, tough, unbreakable. She used to sit with me on warm evenings, sipping tea, talking about everything, husbands, children, money, the law. She had once said, "If you ever get into trouble, real trouble, you call me. No one buries me in paperwork." I hadn't thought about her in years, but now her words came back like a quiet drumbeat in my mind. She was the key. That night, I wrote her name at the top of a fresh page. I still remembered her office address. People think old age steals everything, but they don't understand what memory holds when it matters. I didn't forget the important things. They thought I was confused. They were wrong. More memories returned. The second property, the one my late husband and I bought before the children were even born. A little plot of land, 2 towns over. Paid off, quiet, sitting under my maiden name. I never told the children about it. It wasn't worth much, but it was untouched, and most importantly, it was still mine. They had taken my house, my accounts, but they didn't know about this. This was my safety net, my leverage. Page by page, my notebook grew. Names of the staff who handled my paperwork, the bank employees my son spoke with, the loan officer's name from the refinancing I never approved, the exact dates they brought me here, the power of attorney papers I had never agreed to. My legal identity was sitting in the hands of people who called themselves my family, but I was taking it back, line by line. My strength returned slowly. At first, I could barely stand for more than a few minutes without the nurses rushing to my side, speaking to me in baby voices. But as the days passed, I stretched when they weren't looking. I walked small laps in my room at night. My breathing grew stronger, my legs steadier. They didn't notice. They saw what they wanted to see. A tired old woman sitting quietly by the window. But inside, I was rebuilding. My mind, my body, my plan, all of it came back to life, like embers slowly igniting. I didn't need anyone to save me. I was saving myself. They visited occasionally, my son and daughter-in-law, sitting on the edge of my bed like they were doing me a kindness. They spoke in sweet, careful voices. "How are you adjusting, Mom? Isn't this better for you? Less for you to worry about." I smiled. I nodded. I let them believe I was grateful. That was part of the plan. They thought they'd won. But every visit gave me more to write down, more details to store. They were sloppy. Greedy people often are. They forgot who I was before they ever arrived. They forgot what I had done to build their lives, to keep them fed, warm, and educated. I hadn't been weak then. I wasn't weak now. I was simply quiet. Quiet and very busy. Every evening, I read through my pages, organizing my notes, reviewing every detail like a lawyer preparing for trial. My notebook wasn't therapy. It was evidence. And when the time came, it would be enough. They thought I was settling in. I was setting up. Gloria arrived, firm and kind, just like I remembered. She was the same woman who had once sat with me in the kitchen, sipping tea and talking about the world, like it was a puzzle she could solve with a single glance. There was no hesitation in her step as she entered the facility, her heels clicking against the sterile floors like they belonged to someone who had nothing to fear. She didn't need to announce her arrival. She was already there, commanding the room without a word. "You're not the first," she said softly, a small smile tugging at the corner of her mouth as she looked at me. "But you'll be the last they do this to." I nodded, the weight in my chest lifting slightly. It wasn't over, but it was starting. Finally, the first step. The papers we filed that day weren't just legal documents. They were a declaration, emergency orders, financial, medical, property. They were the foundation of everything that was to come. Gloria's hand moved across the paperwork like she had done this 1,000 times, and I felt the familiar steadying of my mind. The words on the paper didn't feel like just another form to sign. They felt like a battle plan. Every page, every document was a small victory, a single piece of evidence that would bring the entire structure down. The deed to the second property, the one they had forgotten about, was pulled from the safe deposit box. My husband and I had bought it years ago, a small piece of land with a view of the mountains. It had been mine, fully paid off before any of this began. I hadn't told the children. They had no idea it existed, and they wouldn't find out until it was too late. I handed it to Gloria, who looked at it, then looked up at me with the faintest smile. "They thought you had nothing left. I had kept it quiet. I had kept it hidden, and now it was my weapon." Gloria didn't need to ask for anything else. She knew. She took it and filed it under property rights, the first line of defense. I wasn't just reclaiming what they'd stolen from me. I was preparing to take back everything they had taken for granted. Next came the medical evaluation. They thought I was confused, losing my faculties. They had seen it all along in the way they spoke to me, the way they treated me as someone whose mind was slipping. So I had myself tested. The doctors who came in were different from the ones they sent. Gloria had chosen them carefully. They asked me simple questions, but every answer came back sharp. The tests were straightforward, but the results were anything but. I passed every question, every cognitive test, with ease. I didn't need their pity. I didn't need their pitying looks or their whispered concerns. I wasn't the woman they thought I was. I was still here. I was still sharp. I was still in control. That evening, after everything was set in motion, we filed one last set of papers, the legal documents that would end their hold on me. And when the sheriff showed up the next morning, the look on my son's face as he read the papers, it was priceless. They laughed when I signed the papers. They thought it was all over. They thought I was just a tired old woman, a shadow of who I once was. They weren't laughing when the sheriff showed up with mine. Gloria had it all written down, everything they had done to me. The signatures I had never given, the accounts I never authorized, the house they had stolen. It was all there in black and white. They thought they had control, but now the power had shifted. The look on my son's face as the sheriff handed him the papers was all I needed. The papers that explained it all. The papers that took away the control they thought they had. The look on his face was a mixture of confusion and fear. He didn't know what to do with the information. He didn't know how to fix it. And in that moment, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. It was respect. A recognition that I wasn't the woman they thought I was. I wasn't done. When they tried to argue, the sheriff simply handed them the next document, the order to vacate the property. "The house is under new ownership," he said, his tone calm and final. The cold realization hit them hard. It was no longer their home. The home I had once built with love, with sacrifice, was mine again. Every paper, every form, every quiet word had led us here. Later that day, I walked out of that facility, not discharged, but dismissed. They had tried to lock me away. They had tried to erase me, but I wasn't erased. I wasn't gone. They couldn't see me, not the way I had always been, not the way I had always been strong. But now they did. Now they would. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had fought for my life, my dignity, my power. And I had won. They took the kitchen. I sold the whole house. It wasn't anger that drove me. It wasn't bitterness. It was simply the need for closure, for control. They had thought they took everything from me, my home, my freedom, my voice. But what they didn't know was that I had more than they could ever take. I wasn't loud and I wasn't rash. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to make a scene. I took my revenge with silence and paperwork. The first thing I did was sell the house, the one they tricked me out of. It didn't take long. My lawyer, Gloria, had already laid the groundwork. She made a few calls, handled the contracts, and with the signature I once gave so easily, the house was gone. The money, though, was mine. The proceeds from the sale went directly into a trust. Not a trust in their names, not even a trust with a hint of their involvement. I didn't need to give them that. No, the trust was for someone else, someone I would choose, someone who earned it. The paperwork was filed, and the money sat there, quietly building, growing. For once, the only people benefiting from my sacrifice would be the ones who deserved it. I didn't need the house. I didn't need the empty rooms or the memories that had been suffocated there. It wasn't home anymore. It had never really been mine. They had taken that from me the moment they signed me away. Next, I changed my number. No calls, no messages, no more excuses. The old one was disconnected, and the new one was never given to anyone who had ever once called themselves my family. I didn't need their calls. I didn't need their fake apologies. I didn't need to hear them lie about their concerns or pretend to care. They didn't care. They never had. The new number was mine. Only the people who mattered would ever have it. Only those who had truly earned a place in my life would be allowed to reach me. The rest? They could wonder. They could wait. But I was done. And then the restraining order. A final line, a clear boundary. I didn't need their permission. I didn't need their agreement. I didn't need their understanding. It was official. They couldn't come near me. They couldn't show up on my doorstep pretending they still had a right to be there. The sheriff would be the one to knock on the door next time. The one to serve them the papers that said they couldn't touch me, couldn't demand anything of me anymore. They had made their choice. Now they would live with it. I didn't want to leave anything up to chance. I didn't want any confusion. So I left them a voicemail. One voicemail, short and simple, just enough to make sure they understood. The phone rang once, twice, before the voicemail kicked in. The key you took doesn't fit anymore, I said, my voice low and clear, calm and final. No shouting, no rage, just the truth, said with a quiet, measured tone. The silence after I hung up was satisfying. Not because it was over, it wasn't, but because I had finally taken control. I had reclaimed my life. The phone went silent after that. No more messages, no more visits. But it wasn't enough to stop them. They couldn't just let it go. They didn't understand yet. So they came. They came to the gate outside my new home, my new boundary, my new life. I had already changed the locks, installed security. But still, there they were, standing at the gate, banging their fists on the iron bars. The sound echoed across the yard like a desperate plea, but I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I watched them from the window, my hands wrapped around my cup of tea. The steam curled up in front of my face like a shield. The same tea I had made for years, the same ritual of comfort, of peace, of being the one who decides. I took a sip, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. The cold fire inside me burned a little brighter. They were outside, demanding answers, demanding to be let in. But I didn't answer. I didn't move. I didn't need to. The house was mine now. The property was mine now. My life was mine. I wasn't the one who had lost anything. I was the one who had everything. And as I sat there sipping my tea, watching them bang against the gate, I realized something. They would never understand. They would never get it. But I had everything I needed. I was free. They called. I didn't pick up. The first message came 2 days after they were turned away at the gate. It was my son's voice, quiet, as if he wasn't sure what to say, but with that familiar edge of desperation. "Mom, we didn't mean it," he said. "Please, just talk to us. We want to fix this. We're sorry." I didn't call back. I didn't listen to the rest of the message. I had heard enough. The words didn't reach me anymore. Their apologies were hollow, like plastic flowers, pretty at first glance, but empty beneath the surface. I had learned long ago that saying sorry didn't make up for everything that was lost in the years before. The second message came the next day. "We miss you, Mom," my daughter-in-law's voice said, softer this time, like she thought maybe if she said it gently enough, it would change everything. Please, let's talk. We're a family. We can work through this. I didn't pick up. I didn't want to. There was nothing left to say. There was nothing they could say that would make up for the years of silence, the years of using me, the years of taking without giving. They thought an apology could undo what had been done. But I wasn't interested in their words anymore. I wasn't interested in their guilt. When I didn't call back, the flowers started arriving. Every time I went to the door, there was another bouquet. Lilies, roses, daisies, all of them beautiful, but all of them meaningless. The cards that came with them said the same thing. We miss you, Mom. Thinking of you. Please forgive us. They thought that flowers could fix everything. That sending a bouquet made everything better. But it didn't. The flowers were just a reminder of what they had done, not what they could do. I threw them out as soon as I could. Not because I hated them, but because they were nothing but a token for their own guilt, a way to make themselves feel better without doing the real work. And they weren't done yet. The emails came next, their voices begging in typed words. Can we talk? Please? We need to talk. Mutual friends sent messages, too. The church ladies, the neighbors who had seen me for years at the Sunday service, asking if I was okay, asking if I was willing to forgive. But I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I didn't explain myself. I didn't justify my decisions. I didn't tell them how much it hurt or how much I had given, how I had raised them and loved them only to be discarded like I was nothing. I didn't tell them that I wasn't mad, just tired. Tired of being used. Tired of giving without being seen. I didn't need their pity. I didn't need them to fix me. I was done explaining, done apologizing. I had learned to live without them, without their approval, without their love. And it was enough. The phone calls stopped coming. The flowers stopped arriving. The messages ceased. I had made my point, and I wasn't the one who needed to do any more work. I had already given everything. The rest was up to them. Let them say I changed. I told myself quietly one evening, watching the sun set through my window. I did. I got better. Maybe I wasn't the burden after all. I had spent so many years giving everything, my time, my love, my strength, that I didn't know how to stop. And when they took it all, when they turned away and left me in a place that didn't feel like mine, I thought I had nothing left to give. But I was wrong. I wasn't the one who had lost. They were. And in the silence that followed, I found something new. I found myself. I found my peace. I bought new furniture, not because I needed it, but because it felt good to choose, to buy what I wanted. The old sofa had been sagging under the weight of years spent waiting. This new one was soft, but strong. I could sink into it without feeling like I was giving up something in the process. I picked out a coffee table that wasn't too big, just right for me. The furniture didn't just fill the space. It filled me, reminding me that I could create the life I wanted. I could make choices again. I could fill my space with things that reflected who I had become, not who they thought I should be. I baked again, too. It started with small things, simple recipes. My husband's favorite apple pie, a recipe I had kept tucked away for years. I hadn't baked it since he passed, too caught up in the rush of life, the chaos of raising children, working, giving, and giving. But now, the kitchen was mine again. The pie crust, warm and golden, filled the house with a scent I thought I had forgotten. I didn't bake for anyone else. I baked for myself. Each bite was a small act of reclaiming, a small moment of peace. I had never needed their approval. I had never needed to feed them with love. Now I fed myself. I started volunteering at the local library. I loved the quiet of it, the smell of the books, the soft rustle of pages being turned. I had always loved books, but had never given myself the time to read much of anything. Now, I had all the time in the world. I helped children pick out their first books, watched their eyes light up when they found a new story. I shared the love of reading without expecting anything in return. And it felt good. I gave not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I helped in small ways, and it reminded me that I still had value. I didn't need anyone to see it. I saw it, and that was enough. I began writing letters to myself. I had so many things I never said, so many thoughts I had tucked away, and I needed to get them out. At first, the letters were just jumbled thoughts, scribbled down in the margins of notebooks. But over time, they became more. I wrote about my past, about the way I had loved and sacrificed and given. I wrote about the pain of being unseen, the betrayal I never wanted to believe. And I wrote about my healing, my strength, and my quiet independence. I didn't need to send the letters to anyone. I didn't need them to be read. I just needed to write. The act of writing, of putting my words on paper, was like finally letting go of the weight I had carried for so long. It was my way of saying, I am still here. I still matter. One day, I hung wind chimes outside my kitchen window. They were simple, silver, with a soft, melodic sound that carried on the wind. The sound was delicate, but it filled the space. It wasn't loud or demanding. It was gentle, like the life I was learning to live. I didn't need the noise anymore. I didn't need the clatter of their voices, the demands of their lives. The wind chimes played their song for me, for the peace I had found in silence. They were a reminder that even in the quiet, there was beauty. At night, I slept peacefully again. I no longer tossed and turned, wondering if I had done enough, if I had given enough. I no longer woke in the middle of the night, my mind racing with unanswered questions. The room was quiet, the wind chimes just a soft hum in the background. And for the first time in years, I slept soundly without fear, without guilt. I had built a life on my own terms, and that was enough. I didn't need anyone to come for me. I had already come for myself.